Hey guys, I wanted to make a quick video for you to help you out with what you're working on this week before Friday's quiz. Um, Understanding how to shift supply and demand and use that to predict what's going to happen to the price and the quantity of a good is really important basic economics. This is a skill that you have to master in order to progress in economics, whether it's this class or in future classes. Plus, it's a great skill to have and an understanding to have because it'll help you understand the world a lot better. You can think about all sorts of things from the price of goods in the store to how various laws are going to affect things. You can think about the stock market. You can take this information and this sort of thinking with you into the rest of your life. So here's some questions that I wanted to show you how to graph and how to work through. And certainly, if you have any questions, shoot me an email. So, we're always thinking about a specific good and how changes in the world affect the price and the quantity of that good. So, you can see at the top here, I have three questions. All of them are based on this initial information. In the market for gasoline, how will the price and quantity be affected if? Okay, so let's take each one of these in turn. And there are some key steps that we want to follow every time we answer a question like this. The first thing is we want to set up our diagram. So we're going to use the supply and demand diagram. And the supply and demand diagram here always has a vertical axis and a horizontal axis. The vertical is always labeled price, and the horizontal is always labeled quantity. So the price of the product, gasoline, and the quantity of gasoline that is supplied and that is demanded. Under normal circumstances, we always have a supply curve that slopes up and to the right. We can label this S for supply, and we always have a demand curve that slopes down and to the right. And we'll call this D for demand. Remember, D down and D demand. So you put the D down here, and that's help you remember that demand always slopes downward like this, and supply is always the upward sloping one. Easy to confuse the two. Next thing we want to do is we are always going to assume that the price of the product is determined by the equilibrium in the market. So where supply and demand equal each other, where they intersect, that point is what we call the equilibrium point. And from that equilibrium point, we can drag out here to the axis, and we can label this with a P. We'll call it a P1 to indicate that this is our initial price, P1. And this would be some dollar amount. So maybe this is $2 per gallon. And then the quantity down here, the quantity comes off this equilibrium. So this is going to be some amount of gasoline that is bought and sold over a certain period of time, maybe per day or per hour, per week. So it's some quantity. So I have no idea what kind of number to put down here. We could be talking about thousands and thousands of gallons of gasoline. So I'll just pick a random number. I'll just pick 100, and I'll say 100 of what? 100. Maybe this is 100,000 gallons. Maybe quantity here is actually measured in thousands of gallons. So 100 represents 100,000 gallons. Okay, let's try question number 1 then. Gasoline is a normal good and consumer incomes increase. So let's unpack that a little bit. A normal good is a good that people buy more of when their incomes go up, and when their incomes fall, they buy less of those goods. So in this case, it's a normal good, so people are going to buy more of it if their incomes increase, and it says right here, consumer incomes increase. So there's an increase in income. Gasoline's normal. That means there's going to be an increase in how much people buy. So is that affecting the supply of gasoline, or is that affecting the demand of gasoline? That's always the first step. And the answer here is going to be this is going to affect the demand. So this is affecting how much people want to buy it. It's not affecting how much producers are wanting to offer for sale. Simply put, people want to buy more gasoline. That's what's happening. So is this going to be an increase or a decrease in demand? It is an increase in demand. And we always show an increase by shifting the curve to the right. So an increase in demand is a rightward shift of the demand curve. That means at any price, $2, or if the price were 4 or 1 or 10 cents, people would want to buy more of it now. So let's go ahead and draw in a new demand curve off to the right to show that there's been an increase. I'll call this D P2. It's a new demand curve, separates it from our original demand curve. And what we can then do is predict that because of this increase in demand, the price will rise to the new equilibrium point up here. So we have a new equilibrium point. We're going to draw in a new price. Hypothetically, we'll just call this P2, but maybe this is actually $3. So maybe the price has risen to $3. And then the quantity of gasoline that is bought and sold in the market, that's going to be off of this axis. So maybe it's 125,000 gallons. So there's been an increase here in the quantity. There's been an increase here in the price. And that would answer our question. So back to the original question, how will the price and quantity be affected if gasoline is a normal good and consumer incomes increase? The answer is price will rise and quantity will rise. But you have to get that by shifting the demand curve in the correct direction and then reading the graph. So always do the graphing first. Don't try to just guess what's going to happen to price and quantity. Guarantee you'll make some mistakes. For number 2, gasoline is made from crude oil and the price of crude oil decreases. Again, starting point with any one of these questions is draw the graph. Even before you read it, you can assume if we're talking about a market, we're talking about supply and demand. So go ahead and draw a supply and demand graph. So we have price, quantity, and supply and demand. Now, is this what product are we talking about here? Supply and demand of what? Is it the supply and demand of crude oil? No, it's not. In the market for gasoline, how will price and quantity be affected if gasoline is made from crude oil and the price of crude oil decreases? So crude oil is not the market we're actually analyzing here. We're thinking about the market for gasoline, but we talk about crude oil because crude oil is somehow tied to the market for gasoline. And how is it tied? How is it connected to the market for gasoline? People who make gasoline have to purchase crude oil in order to make the gasoline, because gasoline is made out of oil. So gasoline refiners have to purchase crude oil. And what has happened to the price of crude oil? It has decreased. So if you're in the position to make gasoline and oil is now cheaper, do you buy more oil or less oil? Well, I would think you'd buy more of it because it's less expensive. So gasoline refiners now are going to buy up more oil because it's so much less expensive for some reason. They're going to buy more of it. And if they're going to buy more crude oil, what can they do with gasoline? They can make more gasoline. So is this affecting the supply or the demand of gas? And the answer is this is affecting the supply of gasoline. So you want to go back to that list of shifters of supply and shifters of demand. This is a change in the input price. So this is going to act on the supply side of this market. It's going to affect supply. And the question is it increase or decrease supply? It's going to increase supply. And here's where you got to watch out. Big time mistake that people make is they shift the supply curve up. They lift it up. That's false. That's not how you want to do this. Always shift to the right or to the left. And a supply increase is a shift to the right. So we're going to shift it off to the right, draw in a new supply curve. And I kind of goofed up here. I actually forgot to draw my initial equilibrium. So let me go back and do that. I apologize. So we always want to start off with the initial equilibrium to give us a kind of starting point to compare to. So price and quantity here. Now we can shift the supply curve to the right, draw in a new supply curve, call it S2. And where's our equilibrium point now? Where does the new supply curve interact with the demand curve? Well, it's down here. So this is our new equilibrium. Go ahead and draw in the new price. Put that P2 here. So what has price done? It has dropped. And where's our new quantity? It's out here, Q2. And quantity has increased. Notice this time I didn't use dollar amounts or quantity amounts. I just used P's and Q's to represent those values. So because P1 is higher, or say further along this axis here, P1 is a larger number than P2. So P1 might be, this might be $3 and P2 might be $2. So does it make sense though? Does it make sense? Let's think about it. Gasoline is made from crude oil. The price of crude oil has decreased. And in the market for gasoline, we predict that the price of gas will go down. Does it make sense that if the price of oil goes down, eventually the price of gasoline would fall? I would think so. In fact, we're experiencing that all around us right now. If you go out to the stores and look at the price of gas, it's less than $1 in many places. And indeed, if you don't know this, the price of crude oil is at all-time record lows right now. All right, third question. In the market for gasoline, how will the price and quantity be affected if the availability of public transportation, a substitute for using gas-powered vehicles, increases? So public transportation is becoming more available. So people now have a better option of using public transportation. So of course, not everyone's going to go ahead and start taking the bus or the train, but some people will. And if those people do that, what is that going to do to their demand or supply of gasoline? Well, it's going to change people's usage of gas. They're not going to be driving their car as much, so that means their demand for gasoline is going to change. So let's go ahead and draw this one up down here. Ooh, that's brutal looking, isn't it? Let's try to make a straighter line this time. Not a whole lot better, but somewhat. Quantity, price, supply of gasoline, demand for gasoline. Let's not forget this time to do the equilibrium price and quantity to start with. P1, Q1. This, what I have down here, this graph as you see it, this is how you should start every one of these kinds of questions. Even before you read the question, you can go ahead and draw that up. That's your starting point for analysis for all these questions. So this is kind of a good practice to get into. All right, what do we decide here? The demand for gasoline is going to decrease. That's because people are now starting to utilize public transportation more, and that means they're not using their gas-powered vehicle, so they don't need or demand gasoline as much. So let's go ahead and shift the demand curve in a direction indicating that it is decreasing. That would be to the left. Decrease is always to the left. Drawing our new demand curve right here. Call it D2. D2. And then find the new equilibrium. Our new equilibrium is here where the new demand curve intersects with the supply curve. That gives us a price that we can call P2, and it gives us a quantity we can call Q2. Final step, compare the two prices. Price started at P1, it fell to P2. So price goes down, and the quantity of gasoline bought and sold in this market is going to decrease. So this is how you analyze markets using supply and demand, an extremely essential skill if you're going to be good at economics or move on in this course or any other economics course. Plus, you can start thinking in this context when you think about life around you. For example, I said to you that the price of gasoline in the real world has decreased quite a bit. I went to Woodman's the other day. It was 94 cents. So why is the price of gasoline so low? There's really only two reasons why the price would ever go down. One, demand for the product decreased, or supply of the product increased. So either one of those, or both, if they both happen simultaneously, will cause the price to go down. And sure enough, who's driving? Hardly anybody's driving right now. So the demand for gasoline is very low. And indeed, the supply of gasoline is actually quite high because the price of crude oil is so low. So we have seen both a decrease in demand and an increase in supply. Either one of those would cause the price to fall. In combination, they definitely cause the price to fall, and that's why the price of gas is so low. All right, email me if you have any questions. Otherwise, good luck on your quiz and have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week.